Hello, welcome back to another episode of the Thriving in Intersectionality podcast. My guest today is Rachel Edmondson Clark, and I will introduce her a little bit. First, as always, I'm going to dive into a little bit about the word intersectionality. If you're new to the word or you're very familiar with it, thank you for being here. What is intersectionality? Intersectionality is a framework that recognizes how multiple aspects of identity, such as background, lived experience, career journey, and different categories like your personal challenges, how all of the things that made us who we are interact to shape how we experience the world and how we lead within it. This framework, I came into the work through the work of Kimberly Crenshaw, and giving that credit to her, she does a lot of work around exploring the intersection of race and gender. And so our research, she coined that term intersectionality, and our research has really explored the experiences of Black women. So if you get a chance, take a look at that. And I love that she really stressed that this is a framework. And so I leveraged that to explore leadership, not just as performance, but as something that has been shaped by our individual identities and our lived experience. And so I love to bring guests together and have them reflect on their journey so far and how all of the things that they are, all of who they are, all of the things that they've gone through is showing up in the work and the leadership lens that they have today. So, my guest today is Rachel. Rachel Edmondson Clark is a UK-based executive coach and facilitator and the founder of Elibar, a leadership development consultancy that is focused on sustainable high performance that serves people, performance, and the planet. And I love so much of what Rachel does. And you can already tell that the universe brought me alignment this time. So I love it. Rachel has over 2 decades of experience studying and applying leadership biology and psychology. She works at the intersection of energy, identity, and behavior, helping senior leaders understand how their nervous system, lived experience, and internal narratives shape the way they lead. I am going to dive into Rachel's work and some of the insights from our work. But before that, I love to go back to a little bit more about Rachel beyond our bio. So, hi, Rachel. Thank you for being here today.
Dr. Lola, thank you so much for having me on the show. As you said, I just feel like the universe has brought us together. It's been magic to be chatting to you before we started recording. And just thank you for the space and the purpose that you bring with this show. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. All right. So let's dive right in. If you think about the word intersectionality, Rachel, what categories do you want us to know about that has really impacted how you show up and how you do the work you do today?
Well, I love this, and I loved how you described it at the beginning of the show as well. I think there's a few things for me. I think one of the earliest was growing up in my mum's hair and beauty salon. I spent a lot of time there. It was a very busy salon. I worked there from the age of 12 to 21, earning my pocket money and my beer money later on. And, I started sweeping the floor and making cups of tea and ended up working on reception. And just being around people and listening to the conversations. And I think the thing that stands out for me from that is how much I learned to observe and to see and to read others. I would watch them come in to the reception desk and would have to assess very, very quickly where they were at. I might have had 5 or so people round the reception desk at any one time needing my attention, 2 telephone lines ringing. This is pre-internet booking, of course. And to be able to tune into people and where they were at, many who would come in a bit hassled, a bit stressed, they'd go through, they'd have their hair done, and then to come out of the salon, or for me then to see them leaving the salon in that state of calm, or just feeling so much better about themselves because they'd had their hair done, they'd had their lovely head massage. And I think that really stayed with me, that sort of that transformation of emotional state and being able to read people. So that's probably one of the earliest things that that comes to mind.
Wow. I have never had a guest make me think about my hair salon experience. That's a new one. I love it, because you're right. You were doing the work before you got the credit for the work. I think a lot about my experience too when I sit getting my hair done. I mean, I talk about all the things. My hair lady probably knows about everything going on in my wall. So, but then I leave empty. I leave feeling light, and I leave feeling beautiful. And being able to observe that and see the difference and understand why, or maybe think about why that happens for people, is also really important.
Do you know, one of the most touching instances that I can remember, so poignant, I had a lady phone me up one day, and she had cancer, and her family had saved a tremendous amount of money to buy her a real hair wig. And of course it wasn't styled for her, her face or her, how she wanted to look. And of course to cut a wig that had cost that much money and had meant so much, she was going to be putting a tremendous amount of faith and trust into the hairdresser. And she was asking me as the receptionist, have you got somebody that could look after me, that could do this request? I'm very nervous about coming into the salon. I don't want to be seen. I've lost all of my hair, etc., etc. And I remember saying, there's only one person that I want to book you in with. It was my mum, of course, at the time. And she came in, we kept the salon doors open for her after we would have typically closed. And she came in, and my mum took her away from the window and sat her towards the back of the salon. And she recut this lady's wig. And as she'd finished, and she was just finishing dressing it around the lady's face, you just saw the tears start to roll down this lady's face.
Yeah, I knew that was going to happen. Yeah. You have no idea how much that experience transforms people from the inside. And especially with somebody going through that, it's huge. Yeah. It is huge. But thank you for sharing that.
Oh, no. And there's other and this is where you talk about the intersectionality, don't you? There's other aspects as well. I would say,
please share about it. Yeah, I want to know.
I mean, there's a high achiever in me, and there's a drive and some high standards and a real sense of responsibility. And I think what I've come to understand over time is that there's also a people-pleasing element to that, a desire to be liked and to be loved. And if I'm very honest, I think that goes back to my relationship with my dad. What that did, particularly in my early education and career, is that it meant that I pushed myself really, 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 really hard. And that meant that I climbed the corporate ladder pretty quickly. But it also meant that I burnt out. And one day, instead of walking out of my office door to go into the boardroom, I found myself lying on the floor, staring up and looking up at the ceiling tiles, because I'd collapsed and my body had just gone, that's enough, time out. Looking back, that moment wasn't a sudden thing, but it was just the first time that my body had finally gone, you got to listen, girl, like stop. And I think, that was a huge piece for me in my journey and learning. And then we've just been talking about children and being mums, and I know you've got 3 and I've got 2, and they're similar, they're similar ages. And, I think that being a mum brings you back to what really matters very, very quickly as well. So, lots of, a few different things there intersecting that I guess shape my experience.
Yeah. And I love that. And I think that's what I hope people start these conversations with. It's, we could read the bios all day. We could find a bio online. And I love just understanding your perspective as some of the experiences you had growing up, some of the, the things that led up to your career changes, and also the mom side of it. These are huge intersections when it talks about how you show up at work today. So thank you for sharing that.
It's my absolute pleasure. And I think, those high standards, I think I still hold them, but I hold them and I have a different relationship to them. And all of these moments, I think we don't always realize how they're shaping us in the moment. But I think when we look back, it kind of starts to make sense.
Yeah. And I was thinking about one of my recent guests I was chatting with, and one of the things we ended up doing was sitting in this part of the conversation and really allowing her to bring out different things and comparing notes about these, because I realized I don't want to rush through this part. That is probably the most important part of this podcast, is talking about what are the intersections that shape the way we live and lead in the world today. And a lot of time we don't have clear-cut answers. We're forced to sit down and think about it. This is how I was raised. This is some of the things that shaped my perspective. This is where I come from. Right. So I appreciate you sharing.
It's my pleasure. My absolute pleasure. And apologies if you heard the phone then. My phone is switched off. I need to look. I don't know why that went off. But anyway, there we go. We did talk about life earlier, didn't we?
We talked about life and technology. And I think as moms with more than one kid, we kind of agreed that it's okay.
So apologies to everyone for that.
All right. Let's talk a little bit about career choices, career path. So we, for those listening, they heard a little bit about the work you do, and that information, we will also have it in the show notes. But I wanted to talk a little bit about, walk us backwards through your career path. Maybe some of the major milestones and what you studied in school. How did you get here?
Oh, okay. Yes. So I went to college and to university. I studied communications and media, and then I did a master's in marketing and management. And I went into corporate, initially into sales and marketing roles. And I think, like a lot of people, I followed what felt like the right path at the time. It was the path that made sense. It was the path that looked good. It was a path that felt like progress, and I worked hard and I progressed quite quickly, and I found myself in leadership roles fairly early on. And there were parts of it that I really, really loved, particularly working with people, whether that was my clients who I was serving through my sales role, or the team and the team development, and it always felt like the most meaningful part of the job for me. And as I moved on and I took more senior roles, I suppose what ultimately ended up happening was there was quite a lot of pressure. The organisation that I was working for, there was a lot going on. I felt like at the time the weight and the success of the company was predominantly on my shoulders. And I also think, as I alluded to a bit earlier as well, I think because of the way I was wired, that drive and that sense of responsibility meant that the answer for me was to keep putting the pressure on and just to keep doing more and pushing through and to keep going. I'd become very, very interested in positive psychology by that point. And so positively reframing how I felt and kind of pushing on through my feelings and, the stress, and telling myself that, I manage how I feel, and I can, do all that. And that works. That works for a while until it doesn't. And as I said, ultimately, that led to me to that moment when I was on the office floor. And I mean, that moment was horrific for me. I couldn't think. I couldn't breathe. I didn't know what was happening to me at the time. I later realized that it was a panic attack, but I'd never experienced or really heard of anything like that before. So it was an incredibly frightening moment for me. And it had been building for a very long time, and I'd just overridden all of the signals. And although it didn't happen overnight, that really did set me on a very different path, which is, I suppose, what it kind of prompted the transition to where I am today. It led me into coaching, it led me into leadership development, because I realized that part of my role I'd always loved the most, and thinking even back to the salon days, was working with people, was helping them to think differently, helping them to grow. And so for the last 10, 11 years or so, that's been the sole focus of my business. And now I work with senior leaders and organizations, helping them to build capacity as well as capability to lead well.
Well, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. I'm glad you're okay, and I'm glad you
You're a long time ago now.
reroute. I know. I'm glad you did reroute and take the lessons away from that. I was telling somebody that I wear a Fitbit years now. Like, I'm always, if my Fitbit watch gets broken, like, I order an overnight replacement. But one of the things I love about sleep, it tracks my readiness. And usually I work out like 5 days a week. And so I tried to work out, and after like 15 minutes, I was feeling exhausted. And then I was like, you know what, it's okay. And I stopped. And then I looked at my watch, and it was saying, oh, you've pushed yourself out the last 3 days. Your body readiness feels very low.
Yeah.
I'm taking a rest day today. But to your point, we ignore the signals. Depending on the kind of person you are, individuals we have, we push through, we power through, we walk through until the breaks down. And so I definitely want to hear about some advice that you have for individuals, high-performing leaders in a bit. But is there anything else about your career journey that you want to bring in as well, and how you got to where you are today?
I think, I think the only other thing that is perhaps notable and maybe interesting to listeners to hear is that when I first got my very first corporate role, it meant everything to me. And it was the company that I had longed to work for. And within several months of working for this organization that I loved, I found myself on a performance improvement plan because I wasn't meeting the targets, despite being incredibly well set up by the organization. And it was a really low and difficult point for me, that. And what really helped me at the time was a fantastic manager who, when we sat down for him to start the performance improvement plan process, he asked me one of the most brilliant questions. And he said to me, Rachel, what kind of help do you need from me to succeed at this? And I was able to answer him on that question, and I knew what I wanted to ask him for, and that was for him to come and spend time with me in my sales territory, in my patch, and work with me once a week, and we do alternate calls. He does a call and I get to watch and model him, and then I get to do a call and he gives me the feedback. And that was very intensive. And this guy lived more than 200 miles away from my territory. So it was a significant ask to ask him to invest that time with me.
Oh, and this was all in person.
Yes, this is
to show up. Wow.
He was going to have to drive and come with me and physically spend that time with me. And he did it. And I turned that around, and ultimately I ended up getting a promotion and becoming the field sales manager for the whole of the UK and Northern Ireland. But I wouldn't have been able to do that had I not asked for what I wanted, and had I not had a brilliant manager that asked me that kind of question and then followed through on it.
I love it. Yeah, the power of the right manager, because you're right. I mean, the default response usually when you get that kind of performance review is, oh, I'm going to work harder. I can't show any weakness to my manager and I'm just going to keep working. But for him to invite you in that way, and I know we've heard the term, people don't leave a bad company. The people don't leave a company, they leave a manager, right? It's really about the experience you have with the person that you work with every day, that you work with directly.
Correct.
And unfortunately, not every manager is a leader or a coach. Some of them are just managers. So I'm glad you have that.
Correct. And I trust that anyone out here that does manage other, that's listening, that does manage others, may consider how they continue to empower and ask those questions and lead with that kind of curiosity to support people to be at their best.
Yeah, thank you. All right, so let's bring a little bit of your intersections and your insights together now, because I think this is where, if there's anybody listening that maybe some of those intersectionalities that you shared, if it resonates with them, and maybe they're mid-career or they're taking on, they're in leadership roles right now, with maybe some struggles. What patterns do you see in leaders today that are on the same path that you were on? And maybe some advice for what they can do differently. Being the high achiever, overperforming, I think a lot of us have that in us, especially a lot of women that I talk to. I think the overperformance and we didn't talk about the women intersections, but I think that's implied for us is you want to do well, you want to do a good job. And a lot of times the way we try to do that is to work harder, like hold the full responsibility for everything. So what advice do you have just from the lessons from your own experience for people that are in that space? That one.
I couldn't agree with you more in terms of what you've brought up here. And I think that's a really big pattern that I see. And that is that we've, leaders, they're incredibly capable people. They wouldn't be in those leadership positions if they weren't incredibly capable. And the kind of clients that I work with and I love to work with, they do care deeply and they do hold high standards and they do take on a lot of responsibility, often not just for themselves, but for everyone around them. And because of that, they can carry quite a lot. And that instinct, as we talked about, is that when things get pressured or more complex, is to lean in further, is to do more, is to hold more, is to keep things moving. And as we've discussed, that works until it doesn't. And I think that's the biggest mistake, if I can call it that, is that they ignore their own signals along the way. The stress, the fatigue, the frustration, and they see those things as something to manage or push through or put to the back, rather than paying attention to them. And over time, that creates a disconnect. So what I've become really interested in and what I support leaders with now is building their capacity to lead well as their capabilities. And in practice, that can actually look quite simple. I'm going to say this, it's simple, but it's not always easy.
Yeah.
And it's things like you were saying, it's recognizing that, going to the gym and doing the workouts are really good and really beneficial. But there may become a point when actually it's more beneficial for you, instead of doing a hard cardio workout, to just get some daylight, get some fresh air, just spend some time in nature, in your garden, so it's about being aware of what state you're in and noticing when you start to become overwhelmed or reactive, and having ways to bring yourself back to a place of clarity and restoring your energy, and looking after your mood, and that will increase your bandwidth to deal with the stress and the things that we've got on our plates. And when we're connected enough to ourselves, we can make good decisions about how we lead ourselves well, and from a place where we are looking after us, we put ourselves in the best position to serve our families, our communities, our organizations in a much, much better way.
I like that. I like the way you use the two words, capacity and capability. Because I think it gives me language to kind of, the capability piece is what we do well, right? Yes. You take the skills training, you learn how to do it, you figure it out by yourself, you do the degree and then the certification, right? We are capable, but what does your capacity process look like? Right. And that's the part a lot of us miss. I remembered when I had a similar burnout experience a few years back, and my first time going into therapy. And my therapist had asked about all the things I was carrying. And, I talked about my work, I talked about the kids, I talked about marriage. And and then she's like, what does your self-care look like? Like, what do you do for yourself? I was like, when the kids are off. And she's like, no. I mean, what do you do for yourself regularly? And I'm like, well, it's hard to find time. And she's like, no, I'm not asking you for excuses. And I was like, oh, ouch, And at that time, I realized I've always been a gym person. I have a gym subscription, and I had canceled my gym subscription for over a year. And that was the first assignment she gave me after that first session. She said, go get your gym membership. I literally drove to the gym that day to sign up.
Yes.
Because she said, no, you need to find your own thing that you do for you. Whether your family recognizes that or not, you need to find your own wellness practice. Like, what do you do for yourself? This is how you can increase your capacity, not just your capability. So now I'm going to love to use those two words because that's what we always try to explain, right? It's, I can look like I do 20 things, but if I'm not taking care of myself, I'm killing myself silently. And it's up to me to figure that out. People can't see that outside, right?
Absolutely. And I think another thing that and I've got this wrong as well before, is that I think it's the workload or the individuals that are the problem, but actually it's my capacity. And it feels counterintuitive sometimes to take time, not even to take time, to invest the time to restore our capacity so that we can come back to the work and perform at a better level. So I work with a lot of senior leaders, and they would explain to me that, well, Rachel, I couldn't possibly go and play a round of golf on a Friday afternoon, when I'm meant to be at work or doing something else, or I couldn't possibly go and get out on my bike in the middle of the day. And they feel this tremendous amount of guilt attached to that. And then we work together over a number of weeks, a number of months, and they're all of a sudden they're like, oh no, hang on a minute. That rest and restoration is not the reward for the hard work, but it is
Mm.
the prerequisite to being able to sustainably show up and perform at my best.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely. We need to shift our mindset, and maybe that's the biggest takeaway from this is, yeah, we can do hard things, we can do a lot of things, but how do you prepare to do the stuff that you need to do well?
Mm.
Thank you,
And it,
Rachel.
it
All
shows
right,
up.
so well, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, we've got a slight delay. It shows up in the smallest of things as well. Just a quick story to illustrate this. I was working with an executive leadership team recently, and two ladies had buddied up on that team to work together. And one of the things that they'd recognized as a team is that they were very sedentary. They weren't doing a lot of movement. They weren't getting out and getting daylight and nature and movement into their day. And so they were buddied up to help support one another, which was great because these two ladies were in the office together and they'd agreed to go for a 20-minute, half an hour walk over lunch. One phones the other just before they're due to meet. I don't think I've got time to do this today. The other one goes, no, I don't think I have. God, I'm swamped with everything that's going on. Thankfully, they talk each other into doing let's just do 5 minutes round the block. Mm-hmm. They get up. Somebody else notices that they're going and feels jealous that they've got the time to go. But anyway, they get up, they go walk around the block, and they don't come back for half an hour because they recognize that while they're out taking their walk, they are more creative. They are problem solving. They are thinking with greater clarity, and they've fixed a whole bunch of stuff that they would have so easily have just stayed at their desk, tried to get their head down and kind of force themselves on. So it's, even in those small moments like that's yes. What can feel counterintuitive. I just encourage people to just take, even if it's that moment, 5 minutes of restoration and integrating that into your working day. And then if you are role modeling that, if you are a leader and you are role modeling that for your team or your family, that again has an enormous positive impact.
It goes a long way. I like that. And you just reminded me that I used to do that. There was a season when I was in corporate America that I used to put 30 minutes on my calendar for walks.
Yes.
And I realized it was also a good time for me to catch up with people.
Yes.
Outside of work. So, hey, I'm going for a walk. Do you want to come? Hey, I'm going for a walk at this time. Do you want to come? But even if nobody comes, I just go do some laps. And it's so helpful. You are very correct. Yes. And once you do it, you appreciate the value of doing it.
Absolutely. Yes.
So we've talked about individuals, but also maybe a little bit more advice for leaders. I think you just gave a good one, which is role modeling some of these wellness practices. But if you are somebody that is responsible for managing a team as part of your day-to-day job, how can you create a culture that really helps people feel energized and engaged within the organization?
I think it can start with a really simple but often overlooked idea, and that is that how we feel as individuals and how we make one another feel doesn't just impact our personal performance, as we've been talking about, but it impacts culture too. And I think sometimes we can separate those two things, and we talk about, values and culture over here, and then we talk about personal or team performance over there, where actually those two are completely intertwined. People don't think valued, included, fairly treated, like they belong. They feel those things. And I think when we as leaders can consider if we can lead with how we make people feel, then they will think more clearly, they will contribute more often, they will take more ownership. And so for me, creating that kind of culture, that's not about big initiatives. That's about how we as leaders show up every day. Small moments like the example of those two women going out for the walk, or saying to the team, hey, look, let's do this as a voice call, and we'll all go for a walk while we speak to one another. It's how you listen. It's your presence. It's how you respond when someone makes a mistake. It's how clear you are. It's how consistent you are. And all of those moments are shaping people all around us and how they feel. And so I think the key for me there is that leaders start not just by asking, what do I need people to do, but how do I want people to feel when they're working with me? And I think when you lead with that, you create an environment where people don't just want to perform, but they actually thrive.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, for those listening, you get to hear a lot more about Rachel's work and in conversations on the workplaces that work in the future chats. But for these, as we wrap up, Rachel, I just want you to share maybe something from your own personal life, but also from your work, for anyone that kind of they can relate with some of those identity intersections you share, right? Mom, I performer, all of the things that you are in your intersections, and then connecting it to the workplace of today. Like work is changing. If there's anyone who is kind of in their career in a moment right now and is thinking of what do you do next, can you just share a couple of advice and tips of what they can do better moving into the next stage of their career?
Yeah, no, and I think we were discussing this a bit before we recorded the show. There's a lot happening in the world right now, and it can feel quite overwhelming, even in the sort of the wider landscape, let alone what's happening within our own lives and with our own families and situations. But what we do absolutely have influence over is how we show up. Our homes, in our teams, in our communities. And I think that leadership at its core starts there, that, look after yourself well so that you can show up and report for duty, so to speak, and serve the people that you care about the most. And I think when you look after yourself, you can also, if you do have a challenge or a situation or uncertainty, you can come home to yourself and to your values and what's important to you. And I think you can have a better connection with you when you've listened to those things, and trust your heart in those moments is what I would say. So it's not about having all the answers. It's about showing up well, doing what we can with what we've got, and looking after you so that we can remain with our heads held high and our hearts open in spite of what may be going on around us.
Yeah, thank you. That's about as political as we'll get here. With awareness and recognition for the fact that there's a lot going on in the world, and for everyone to take care of yourself. Yep.
Yeah, and then show up and let's do good and be the force for good that we can be around the people that we get to touch and that we get to impact, the lives we get to impact each day. Absolutely.
Yes. And that makes a difference. That makes a difference. And we were talking about that earlier a little bit too, that as practitioners, as people that work with individuals and businesses, sometimes it gets to be a lot. And just recognizing that I might not be able to cure all the things going on in the world. And instead of letting it get to me, know when to put your boundaries and just impact your one person in your own circle. Even if that one is, even if you have one of those weeks where the one is your kid.
Yes. But how important is that? Just such a significant role. It really is. Really. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Rachel. Before I ask my final closing question, is there anything you want to share with my audience about your work and where to find you?
Oh, that's so lovely of you to ask. Well, I always love to connect with people. So if anything here's resonated, I would absolutely love for you to reach out. And the best place to do that is through my website. And that's Elevar, ELLEVAR.co.uk.
Thank you so much, Rachel. That was great. And the links will also be in the show notes of the places where you can find Rachel and learn more about our work and stay connected. All right. My last question is feels like a bit of off track, but I promise it's connected. It's a food question. So, Rachel,
Okay. Yes,
if, if you were to share a meal or a snack with your co-workers, what will you pick and why?
Ooh, okay. Well, I love food. I'm absolutely rubbish at cooking. My husband does all of the cooking in our house and shopping for food, but I love eating it. So, what would be the food with co-workers? Do you know, I am going to pick sushi.
Oh, okay.
And the reason that I'm picking sushi with co-workers is because it's kind of it's light, it's not too heavy. If I'm enjoying work, it's nice and healthy. We can have vegan options if we need to. Yes, and it won't leave me feeling with that post-lunch slump of complete sort of tiredness and grogginess going into the afternoon. So yes, there we go.
I love it. I think you're the second person that shared sushi with me, and the first time he said sushi, and then he's like, I love the explosion of different flavors. And I'm thinking, I don't know, I'm not a sushi person, but I've never thought of sushi as an explosion of flavors. So I was like, okay.
Maybe really good sushi,
but then that's why I also asked the why behind it, because I feel like I'd also get an insight into the person, because you shared the same meal as somebody else said, but he said that for a different reason. And I love the way you described it, like it's light, it's satisfying, because I can tell the sushi you're having is different from the one he's having.
Yes, obviously. Mine's the cheap Tesco, the supermarket one,
Well, I love it. I love food is definitely one that brings people together. And I think it also says a lot about your perspective and the way you love to bring people together by the choices that you make. So thank you so much for sharing that.
It's my pleasure.
All right. Well, thank you, Rachel, for being here today. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. As always, please share, rate, review this episode. Stay connected with Rachel and I. And if you are looking to be a part of this podcast, reach out or go to the website and fill out a form. You just might hear your episode on here next. Thank you, Rachel, for being here. Have a good rest of your day, evening for you, day for me. And we will talk very soon.
Thank you so much.